Hello friends, welcome back. My name is Ramon. How are you today? I'm gonna ask that you please excuse the state of my face. I know that I look a little dusted, busted, a little bit crusted. But that's because today we're talking about European sunscreen fails. Now, the thing about being based in the UK now is the fact that I got access to some of the best formulations for sunscreens because here they can use all the good filters. But that being said, just because you got some of the good filters does not mean you have some of the good formulas. We're going to break that down today, and I'm talking about some of the holy grail sunscreen brands. I got Roche Posay and Eucerin in front of me. But before we get into it, I'm going to ask that you hit the subscribe button and notification bell so that you know when I post more skincare, sunscreen, and fancy related content on my channel. Give the video a thumbs up, and down below in the comments, tell me what have been some of your biggest sunscreen fails. Have you tried any of the sunscreen that we're going to talk about in this video? Sound off. So again, these are a few sunscreens I actually purchased here in the UK at Boots. For those of you who don't know what Boots is, it's basically like the chemist slash pharmacist here, aka it's like UK Walgreens. They have, just like at Walgreens and at CVS and at Rite Aid in the US, they have sales here. And so I was perusing, if you will, the sunscreen and skincare sections at Boots. I stumbled upon these buy 3 for the price of 2 for specific skincare brands that encompassed Roche Posay and Eucerin of all brands. And being here, actually before I even got here, I saw a lot of hype around Roche Posay and I knew there was a lot of good formulations for their sunscreens. And I also knew Eucerin had some really good sunscreens. So I was like, oh my God, perfect. Let's buy some sunscreens, let's stock up. And so I started using these and realized not all of them slapped. And so we're going to talk about those sunscreens today. All of these retail here in the UK for roughly between 16 to 20 pounds. So they're kind of affordable, depends on what your definition of affordable is. But I bought these on sale again with my own money. So I got 3 for the price of 2. Mind you, I do have a video of the actual good formulations coming up very soon on my channel. So make sure you hit the notification bell to know when those go live. But today we're going to be talking about 2 from La Roche Posay. I have the La Roche Posay Anthelios Pigmentation sunscreen, as well as the Anti-Shine sunscreen. And then I have one from Eucerin. This is their Eucerin Sensitive Protect Sun Fluid Mattifying Sunscreen. And also don't forget to check the description box for the link to my Patreon for my sunscreen and skincare fund. Again, pretty much everything on my channel is still self-funded, especially these sunscreen reviews. Case in point, I bought these with my own money. So if you're down to support and it's within your means, please consider donating to my Patreon. Again, that link will be in the description box. As with all of my sunscreen reviews, for each of these, the footage you see on screen of me applying them, I do roughly 1/4 teaspoon to cover my face, my ears, and my neck for the most part. We'll talk about that as we get to each individual one. I work it into my skin, let it sit down for at least 5 minutes before I go on top of it with makeup. Because these are kind of combo, and because I didn't want this to be a long video, I'm not doing my chemical or mineral sunscreen rubrics. That's kind of out the window. I'm just talking about the general claims and the general formulation aspects of each sunscreen. So first one on the shit list, we have the Anthelios XL Anti-Shine. And this one stood out to me specifically because it had anti-shine. I'm oily skin. Looking at the claims for this, it's a lightweight mattifying fluid for oily and blemish prone skin that is prone to sensitivity, sun intolerant, or prickly heat. Whatever that means. It has broad spectrum photostable UVA, UVB, and infrared protection, and it's also easy to apply, lightweight formulation that's non-greasy and melts into the skin that is mattifying for long-lasting anti-shine finish. It's also water resistant. Looking at the sunscreen filters, you have homosalate, octocrylene, octosalate, avobenzone, Uvinol T150, Tinosorb S, and then you have Mexoryl XL and Mexoryl SX. Those Mexoryls are both patented by L'Oreal, that's the parent company of La Roche Posay. So you're only going to be able to find those in L'Oreal branded sunscreens. But basically with that, you get really high photo protection. You have an SPF of 50+ with very high UVA protection as well. Some other formulation points, you got skullcap root, which is really popular in K-beauty. I see it in a lot of the sunscreens I try from Japan and Korea, and that's a really great antioxidant as well as having some antibacterial benefits, aka anti-acne. You also have perlite and zinc gluconate, which are the ingredients that La Roche Posay themselves are saying helping with the anti-shine and anti-acne benefits as well. They will say this is also alcohol and fragrance free. Talking about my experience with this, I actually played around with this for a couple days, and the first time I actually saw it was on my boyfriend. One day we went to the bus stop and I was like, why is your face like crusty? He was like, ugh, I use a new La Roche Posay sunscreen. He was like, it was kind of hard to apply. Like I had to really like work to get into my skin, and I was like, oh, okay, that's weird. So then I used it once after that, and I found it took a lot of elbow grease to work it into my skin, especially my hairline and whatnot. I felt like there wasn't a lot of slip. I was like, oh, okay, this is not the most elegant texture. Looking at what the texture actually is, it's just like a very generic sun cream. It's not necessarily a gel. It's not the most like lightweight, thin, watery texture, but it's not the most inelegant. And so knowing I took a little bit of work to put on the day that we were filming the review for this one, that I was going to go in and really moisturize my skin. So I went in with the Fenty night cream to prep my skin. That way I had a nice slip underneath the sunscreen, and it worked in a lot better. As you can see on the screen, it worked in, so I had to put a little bit of elbow grease in, but it wasn't horrible. It took a minute for it to set down, but it doesn't look bad on the skin. skin with a note saying that it does look bad in my facial hair, my eyebrows, my mustache. It does collect. What I will say though is makeup did apply nicely. I found this gave me a very natural finish. It kind of controlled oil for the first few hours of the day, but with these wear tests, I don't blot or anything. So by hour 8, I was kind of greasy. What I will say though too is with these sunscreens, because they're technically more chemical-based combo sunscreens, I was like, let me try a reapplication on top of makeup. And with this one, as you can see on screen, it wasn't the best experience, but it wasn't that bad necessarily. I feel like with using a certain kind of applicator, as opposed to the one I was using on screen, might be a little bit better, but I think this formula is just a little bit too rich maybe. So not the best for reapplication. It wasn't the worst out of the 3 of these though. Next up is the other option from Roche Posay, and this is their Anthelios Pigmentation. So the tea with this one is it's a chemical sunscreen that is tinted. Reading some of the product deets, it's a formula that instantly unifies the skin, correcting uneven pigmentation. You have broad spectrum UV protection, SPF 50+, and specifically they do advertise that this has an UVA PF of 39, so very, very high UVA protection. It also has infrared A and pollution damage protection as well, mostly in the form of antioxidants. It is to protect against sun-induced melanin, aka basically pigmentation-related issues as a result of free radical damage and UVA damage as well to the skin. This is supposed to leave a natural-looking tint that instantly corrects uneven pigmentation, and it also says this cream is non-greasy and easy to apply without leaving marks, and it's also water resistant. This is the sunscreen I got on right now. So looking at the UV filters for this, again, I mentioned this is a combo tinted sunscreen. So looking at the filters, you got octasalate, Tinosorb S, you have titanium dioxide. What I will note is that this has titanium dioxide as a UV filter, and then separately on the ingredients list, it has titanium dioxide as a pigment, avobenzone, and then Mixoryl XL and SX again. And so very similar to the last one, very broad spectrum protection, but also a very high UVA protection value as well. And so besides the titanium dioxide, that's the UV filter, I mentioned that there's the pigment, titanium dioxide, a white pigment that's also mixed with iron oxides in this. And so it's those iron oxide pigments that's really providing a lot of the visible light infrared protection this is talking about to really protect against free radical damage on the skin, and as a result, the pigment induced problems associated with that. This also has shea butter, cornstarch, and it does have denatured alcohol in it as well. My experience with this, and again, what really caught my eye was like, oh, this is tinted. Why is it tinted? This is a very non-inclusive sunscreen sold as the wrong thing in my opinion. First and foremost, this is a foundation to me. Looking at the footage on screen, I knew this was tinted. This was not going on my neck. So basically I rationed out my normal 1/4 teaspoon in half, so an 1/8 teaspoon to just do on my face. And even with that, I was like, this is a lot considering that this is a very rich cream. It's very similar to the last one I just tried out, but it's pigmented, and the pigment is in no way subtle. It's very opaque. This is essentially a medium to full coverage foundation. With one layer of this, a lot of my pigment issues on my cheeks were like covered, but not unified. It was like foundation covered. But what I will say, giving it one positive, is that for the first time, this is the one sunscreen that's tinted I have not seen have a very cool or pink or even gray undertone to it. This is very warm, but because it is very like medium to full coverage, that warm undertone doesn't work well for me, so it just shows up as the wrong color, and it's a little bit too dark for me. I would guesstimate this is in the low Fenty 300s. I color matched it right next to Fenty 300 foundation, and this pulled a little bit more warm, so it's probably around like Fenty 310, 320. Because the coverage of this was so opaque and this does have a lot of body to it, I didn't put makeup on top of this besides trying to offset the warmth of this with a more neutral foundation powder. And even then I was like, oh, this is getting really cakey. I don't like the texture of it. I basically just set my face, corrected my under eye, and that was the extent of it. So this is basically pretty much just a sunscreen on my face as is. Overall, for 8 hours of wear, it doesn't look horrible. My under eyes are a little bit creasy, but I do have in my notes that this did collect heavily in my facial hair. It's one of those things where like you want to put it on as a sunscreen so you like massage it in, but in reality this is a foundation. I really had to go blend it in, make sure it blended nicely into my hairline. There was no weird lines, make sure it didn't like collect up in my eyebrows and my mustache and have a line here as well. It just wasn't the most elegant application. This does leave your face nicely matte though, which is really nice, and I feel like it does control oil for a good amount of time. But just with like the tint and the texture and like how my hands were just covered in that pigment afterwards, I was like, this isn't the most fun to use. Looking at the reviews of this, as I was like trying to get the information for the video, it has not the best reviews, and a lot of people were like, this is very pigmented, this is not great for fair skin, this is not great for deep skin. This is a very specific color and product type for like a specific skin tone range with a specific skin concern. Like if you are medium to tan with more oily skin, and like this is like your specific undertone. The only way I could really see this working is as a topper for another sunscreen that does have a white cast on it in a very sheer layer. And also I just want to say I did not reapply with this in any capacity, because imagine reapplying a medium coverage foundation on top of a medium coverage foundation. And the last sunscreen to talk about today, this is the Eucerin Sun Face Fluid Sensitive Protect Mattifying Sunscreen, SPF 50+. So looking at the claims of the sunscreen, this says Eucerin's advanced spectral technology offers very high factor UVA and UVB protection and high energy visible light defense. The sunscreen also supports skin's own DNA repair mechanism and is specifically for combination to oily, sensitive skin. Filters in this, you got avobenzone, octisalate, tinosorb S, nano titanium dioxide, evenol T150, and ensilazole. So you're getting really good filters for very broad spectrum, high UVA protection. And then other formulation notes, this also has alcohol, some humectants, tapioca starch to help mattify oil and give it that mattifying finish. And then you have Chinese licorice plant in 2 forms. You have the root extract of it, which Eucerin calls lycocalcicone A, and that's for the antioxidant benefits they advertise with the sunscreen. And then you have the Chinese licorice acid, and that's what they're advertising as the DNA repairing mechanism in the sunscreen. My experience with this. So just off the texture of this, first of all, this is one of those sunscreens you gotta shake, so. Comparing it to the more cream base of the Roche Posay, this one is very thin, very watery. And so with that, I was automatically like mad optimistic. I was like, oh, this is such a different texture. It's so lightweight. The thing with this is the minute you start rubbing it in, it like thickens in texture and you're like, oh, okay. It kind of has this whiteness to it that sits on your skin for a second until it dissipates. And it dissipates in a couple minutes, but at first you're like, oh shit, this is gonna leave me with a white cast. But as you can see, it like eventually does set in, and like after a while, as you can see on screen, it's like, oh, okay, it's not horrible. As I mentioned, it took a little bit of time to work in just because that white cast wasn't going away and I panicked. But because of the texture of it, as it like kind of got a little bit more thick and it feels like it has a little bit more that tapioca starch or the titanium dioxide, I'm still not sure, gives it a little bit of grit. This does collect in the facial hair. So it gets chunky up in the brows, the hairline, the mustache, and the beard. And it's kind of like, oh. I had to like rub that in really well just to make sure that dissipated. Then I went on top with makeup. Because this does leave a nice powdery finish, makeup went on really nicely. There was no weird issues, no odd texture problems, and my makeup looked very flawless for the first few hours. And I can't attest to like full day wear test on this one in terms of oil control, because when I went for reapplication with this one, I was like, again, this is like lightweight, this is a nice texture, this should reapply nicely. It doesn't. This like sat on top of my makeup at first and was like not blending in, and then it kind of melded down into like a very like radiant but like this weird like shiny but kind of like chromy finish on the makeup. But more so, it just like balled up and collected up in my beard and my hairline in the most unattractive way. So gross. So in that regard, it wasn't the best sunscreen for reapplication. Texture wise, this is okay on initial application, but it's one of those things where it's like, is it worth it? So basically, let's finalize why these were shits. And for the most part, it's just that, first of all, we're not brown skin friendly. I do not think these would work on individuals with skin darker than mine, especially if you have deep dark skin, especially if you got facial hair. If you're an individual who has deep skin and has facial hair that's dark and coarse, none of these will work for you, first and foremost. Secondly, all of these are designated for sensitive skin types. Generally, I think all of these are actually for oily skin types that have more sensitive skin. That being said, I just wonder why, when these formulations are designated for sensitive skin types, why elegance has to like go out the window. Especially, I want to know why titanium dioxide is featured in all of these and what those really attribute to the formulas besides adding a chalkiness and potential white cast and weird texture issues that I don't want. So all that being said, make sure you stay tuned because very soon, hopefully in the next week or two, I will be having the winners of my Euro sunscreen tryout for this little first part of 2021. Again, I bought a lot of sunscreens, actually in huge part to the people who've donated to my Patreon. So if you are one of my patrons, huge thank you. This haul wasn't because of you, but the haul of the good ones are coming up soon. That's because of you. So thank you. And remember, just check the description box for the link to that if you're willing to and you are down to support. But I will say this fails video went up first because I know you guys are shady queens and you love when we spill the tea on this channel. So with all that being said, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell so that you know when I post more skincare, sunscreen, and fancy related content on my channel. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and down below in the comments, have you tried these? Were your experiences similar to mine? Were they different? Let me know. What are some of your favorite European sunscreens? Sound off. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.